Yeah. You can do it, but you gotta stop. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and the city in which we live. Guide us this afternoon as we make our decisions. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you.
This is a special call meeting of the Newnan City Council, January the 28th, 2020, at 5 o'clock. This is called to order in the invocation. New business, one item on the agenda today is the consideration of Newnan Entertainment and Sports District project. I'll say right up front that we may take some votes today in order for us to move on to the next part of this, to instruct staff to do certain things. The actions we take today by no means bring a final decision to this project. So I want you to understand that at the very beginning, this is a process. This is a step in the process. This is not a vote to approve the project today. You got that, didn't you? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Cletus Phillips, City Manager, and have him step us through it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Council, excited about the opportunity to present findings of our due diligence that we've been performing for the last couple of months on the project. What we have planned today is we're going to hear a overview presentation from Mr. Eric Johnson. So we know Eric from Comprehensive Program Services. Steve Morrow, I think, is out of town today in Phoenix. I think he said he couldn't be with us today. Steve's been doing an outstanding job driving the project, but I'm sure that we're in capable hands of Mr. Johnson today. After Mr. Johnson, we're going to be hearing from Newnan Grand Slam. I think Mr. Grimes is going to speak, and then after that, we'll follow up with an overview, kind of pull it all together. Mr. Craver's going to do that for us. We also have various members of the team here today. I also have Tony King here with us today from Baker Tilly, our financial advisor, who's been running some of the financing scenarios for us. So we've got a little presentation, and we'll get through with that. Q&A.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Let's get started.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. First off, I want to continue to thank the Council and the City and staff for continuing to use Comprehensive Program Services. I know we've enjoyed being down here for, gosh, the last 6 or 7 years, and we really appreciate it and appreciate you trusting us to go through this due diligence of this stadium project. Again, as Cletus had mentioned, we'll go through this kind of summary of all the activities we've done through the due diligence to bring to you all, which I believe you have a packet of our findings thus far. So we'll move forward. How about that? I got it to work. Who are the team members? Obviously, the City of Newnan, Comprehensive Program Services. Cletus mentioned Steve Morrow, who's been the program manager for us, who's been working with Hasco and Cletus quite a bit, along with McMillan, Pasden, and Smith. They are architects who specialize in this type of architecture. Hunden's strategic partners, who we are using for how financially this whole endeavor will work out, and all the different avenues of how revenue and everything else will work out as it pertains to you making a financial decision for the project. Maldino and Wilburn, Bill Wilburn has been doing all the traffic studies. If you can't get to or from this, it won't be a successful project. So it's very key on how the traffic flows to and from this facility. Baker Tilly, again, Tony King, Nelson, Mullins, Riley, Scarborough as well. So private partners, they are National Sports Services, Coastal Plain League. I don't believe the commissioner is here, but we've had 2 public meetings with all of these folks here. It went very well attended. Again, South Tree Commercial Brewery and Apartments. I don't know if Chuck Ogletree's here. He's been at a lot of these too. And then Newnan Grand Slam, which is Tom Crimes, Kip Oldham, Toby Jeffries, and Lee Schlumper, and I know they are all here. So it's been very collaborative with everybody who's been involved in this project. So overall site layout and orientation, I believe you all know where the site is. Over there we have some pictures too. We've done a lot of due diligence on this as well. So this was the initial idea of that we first were given, CPS was given to kind of move forward with. As you'll notice, a lot of the program elements were provided within this, as you see right there. Over the last 2, 3, 4 months, we've met with the users and the staff, and we've tried to culminate with the architecture and hunting strategies to try to figure out what is a couple of different options of how this would work to the benefit of the city of Newnan, and we have some of that for you as well this evening. So, proposed facility overview. Again, this is a multi-use field. The Coastal Plain League will be playing for 60 days, I believe June and July. The rest of it within Newnan Grand Slam will be a lot of events. The field will be big enough for other sporting events other than baseball, concerts, festivals. Newnan Grand Slam is here too. During Q&A, if we'd like to talk to them about actually all the different events that they'll have, but it's quite extensive. So another view of it. So, and this is, let me go back one. So that is soccer, I believe, and next one is for festivals, concerts. So they are entertaining this venue, at this venue, 365 days a year, okay? So, and there, again, that is a performance. So that is with that. Again, collaboratively, we've all worked together, tried to come up with some of the best solutions that we have here today. And we'll turn it over to Tom Crimes to provide his input on Newnan Grand Slam. So.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have really enjoyed this process. It has been a very collaborative process and learned a lot about the strengths and more about our community, and we're proud to be considered for this evening. I'm Tom Crimes. I'm the spokesman for Newnan Grand Slam. We are a local group of people. They're primarily started with 4 individuals, and we came up with the business plan to propose this to the city. And our business plan is ultimately going to evolve into having local participation and ownership in the management of this facility. Again, tonight, I'm here to formally request that you help solidify the partnership with Newnan Grand Slam and moving forward to better understand how this finishes up. We realize, obviously, that tonight's not the night that's going to be decided, but there are some major milestones that must be reached by both the city and our side as well. And it's a process to move forward, and we've made some wonderful steps since June, and we've got many more steps to make in this process, and we're here to answer any questions. And again, I've enjoyed working with everyone with the city, and it has been a really unique community experience. And we hope that when if it comes to fruition, that it will be something that everyone in this community will be proud of and can enjoy. And we're hoping to bring all these parts together. Again, I'm here to answer any questions if you may have any.
Council? I'll start us off. If you could just give us an overview of the organization, how it's proposed that you own, lease, or we own, you lease back from us as an organization, what that breaks down, just an overview.
Absolutely. Newnan Grand Slam is primarily owned by 2 main groups, the 4 people that Eric mentioned earlier, Kip Oldham, Toby Jeffries, Lee Slumper, and myself. We each bring a piece of expertise to this mix. Toby comes from a background of minor league sports and was once an owner of a team up in a hockey team in Gwinnett that was similar to this, the Gladiators. Longtime friend of mine. Ms. Slumper is a former politician and kind of kept us in line to make sure that what we said was reasonable at times, and when it wasn't, she made us aware of that as well. She is primarily the event side of this. She has some background in running tournaments and has some expertise in that she can allude to herself if there's more questions. But the 4 of us teamed up with NSS. NSS is National Sports Services. They presently own 2 teams in the Coastal Plains League now and another team in another league. And their role in this will be to operate the Coastal Plain, the baseball piece of this. As Mr. Johnson alluded to, it's a 60 game, it's a collegiate wood bat. It's not minor league, it is not amateur, it is college kids that are spending their summer to improve their game, and they are, most of them are with host families in the area. So it's a real community spirit around the baseball. The baseball is fairly simple. It's approximately 30 home games, 30 away games. And so the main focus is what to do the remainder of the time, because we obviously don't want such a fine facility to sit vacant. So that's where our group of four ends up doing the event side of it. We've partnered with RSC, which is a concert group, which our plan is, our original pro forma is to run, I think it was 6 larger concerts and then 10 smaller concerts throughout the year. And then there is multiple events and festivals and pieces like that, so that we keep the facility busy somewhere between 70 and 100 times in addition to the baseball at a minimum. It'll grow more than that, because in its evolution, the brewery has come to the outfield wall, which will be open as a regular business that'll be there every day of the week. So there will always be activity in the area.
So now, who owns that portion?
The site itself is owned by the city. The 14 acres is owned and built by the city. Newnan Grand Slam will enter into an agreement if all accepted, whereas we pay a portion of the rent from that brewery. The majority would come back, and all that piece would be determined over the next phases. But the rent from the brewery would come back to the city. The baseball piece pays back toward the city. There's 4 primary income streams to pay down the debt. It is the brewery rent, it is the baseball component, it is the event piece, which has a base, and then an opportunity to participate in the success of the overall event. And then primarily, as like most baseball stadiums, they're named and they have lots of sponsorship and pieces like that, and the city participates in that piece as well. So it's to be determined, but our agreement with CPL is a 20-year lease, I believe. We purchased the franchise and commit to them for 20 years, so our lease would be with the city theoretically 20 years, or have chances for modifications along the way, and milestones that are measurable, so that in the event we overperform, then there's a chance to pay down the debt more quickly, or if there's a chance that we don't perform as hoped, we can explain why and possibly make adjustments so that we can better service what we're committing to.
Any other questions from the council?
I have a question. With regards to the events, you talk about 6 large events, 10 smaller events, and then 60 games. What are the other additional events that you guys plan on bringing in? I know there's festivals, et cetera, so can you kind of give us an overview of that?
Portion of the stadium, as it's currently conceived, is it has a stadium club, which is about 4,500 square feet, which can be rented out to any group that may ever want to use it. I was in Charleston this past weekend, and they have a similar stadium there, and that night it was the medical managers of the area were having had rented the place out for a conference. So that's a real specific thing that it can be. It can be weddings, it can be parties, it can be, and that is just in the stadium club portion of it. Now, the field portion of it, it can be a combination of, I may have to lean on my associate there that knows a bit more about it, but primarily it is festivals and anything that will bring people to the park. There's opportunities for doing different sports, minor league soccer, minor league, and it's very minor. It's not, it's on the CPL level, the lacrosse pieces like that, and there's some relationships we've spoken to with that. The brewery will have events inside their piece where they bring people out into the field and have events where you can bring in multiple users, and the goal is for the facility to stay active at all times, because that's what helps us. Our investors are expecting a return in this as well. And so I've got to perform for them, and that is the intent. And I can, Ms. Schlumper can give you much more detail if you would like.
Well, you say 100 events, though. This is something to work towards, you're not expecting that, obviously, the first year.
Well, the first year would be, if everything went perfectly and things were lining up, the first game would be June of 2021, if everything was perfect. Now, that's a very aggressive schedule to make, but that gives us 18 months to line up events. So yes, sir, the intent is that coming out of the gate, the place will not be idle. There will be multiple staff on our level we have a general manager that will oversee the baseball and the events, so that we have a single point person to talk to, so that we can answer any specific questions. But out of the gate, it is going to be utilized. It's not going to ramp up tremendously.
So would it be appropriate to ask you, is June 1st to 2021, is that the target date, or is there another day that could be it's pretty aggressive, obviously, coming in to start, et cetera, and finish? So is there another time frame that's still might be out there?
There are multiple time frames that are out there. The reason that was selected was it coincides with the baseball. The baseball is a 2-month period that starts on or about June 1st, and so that was why that date was selected. When we started this June of this year, that was 2 years out, and so we whittled away some of that time.
Right.
If that were not to occur and we missed it by a month, we could figure out ways to participate. Not all teams in this league play in venues of this magnitude. Right. They vary greatly. But if that date was not made, then when it was open for business, we could begin the event side and catch the baseball in the following season. But what happens is, to get into the baseball rotation, we start in, I think it's October of the year before. So there's some lead time pieces to make sure that all the teams in the leagues are here and all that piece. So.
You have a question?
Yes, I do. I'd like to hear from Ms. Lee about the other 2 months.
Absolutely.
And as she's I see illustrations of tall buildings. Are those locker rooms, or what are they?
No, sir. The tall buildings that you see on the right side here, this is the private side that Mr. Johnson alluded to, that has a retail component on the bottom floor and apartments above it that are connected to this project. They're not quite as formal, whereas the city's paying for it and being a leasing agent in it. So, but they're part of this project that must happen at the same time in order to get the mass of people and the excitement here.
And where does that money go to build those?
It is private money being, yes, sir. It is being, again, I'm a piece of that, and I know enough of that to be,
Okay, all right.
but it is.
That's okay. Let's hear from Lee.
Right, and I can tell you real quickly about the buildings.
Oh, okay.
In general, if this was the plan that was gonna be built, now, during the next couple of periods, it could change and become larger, smaller, but in general, if you look at this section up here.
Stop it.
Moving target.
There we go.
Third time's the charm.
All right. Let me orient you right this minute. The interstate runs this way. South would be that direction, north would be this direction. The Newnan Crossing bypass is this direction over here. The property line, assume it sits at the base of this building. So behind that is all private and parking for that piece. This is obviously the stands and the covered section here, dugouts with berm seating here. This is tickets, concessions, and restrooms. This is locker rooms and offices. This is the event center that I was speaking of that can be rented out year long. And then this piece over here was the brewery piece. Good.
We know more now.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I'm Lee Schlumper. On the event side, we've been working with two groups primarily, RCS Services, which runs concerts and production for such concerts, who have been consulting with us about the level and the size of concerts that we can bring to this area. And what we found is that we are about competitive with what you would see over in Peachtree City. We can do a little bit larger event than they can because our demographics here are slightly younger, so we can bring kind of a different feel and vibe to that. One of their partners that they have is Premier Events, who works primarily in the metro Atlanta area. And they've also been consulting with us on what kind of additional events that we can have. And typically in a scenario like we're looking at, we could run beer and wine festivals, we could have Easter sunrise, I just got pricing today to do an ice skating rink for the full month of December and for January. And each of these events that we will program, of course, will not be done by me, but we're looking to hire a professional, someone that's been in the business of convention centers or along that lines, or to contract with Premier Event Services themselves, because they do this for a living. And we kind of feel like if they've, why reinvent the wheel if they know how to do it? But the goal is to once a month have a community event there, such as a night market, or something that would be free to the public that they can come in and see vendors. Once a month, we'll do an event that we create that keeps something there. If you're familiar with the brewery, typically they do fun runs where people will come and I don't know how people do this, but they'll come and run and then drink a beer and then go run and drink a beer. I'm not sure that's anything that I can do at my age, but the part of that programming is to do these self-created events that will vary in price, because what we want to have is some events that are always free to the public, events that will be priced so families can come, and then we will have some events, like if you have a large concert, they'll be priced accordingly to what concerts would be in the area. Does that answer you? Do you have any other questions?
No, that helps us understand the full use of it more. What about use for travel ball, baseball, lacrosse, soccer, anything? Is it just, was one field too limiting, or?
We, of course, got in our model that we can rent the field out if people want to use that. You don't get a lot of money for renting out a fee to the local travel team that wants to come. But of course, as a community service, there will be those opportunities when the field's not being used. We are talking to some folks in minor league soccer. Well, it's not minor league soccer, but I think it's a couple of steps below that. One of the plans that we have that I'm really excited about is to have a Newnan sports club for adults who want to have sports to play, kickball, softball, or flag football that can be run for adults, because we really don't have that in our community. So that's also one of the big plans. And we've kind of got a calendar up, and I would say there's not a lot of days that something's not programmed there. There's more than what you would expect. I mean, I could go down list by list, but I think at some point you guys would tell me to go sit down for all the things that we have planned. But if we're able to hit our target date, the first thing we want to do is a multi-denominational Easter sunrise service. So.
Okay, that sounds good. Maybe my colleagues have some questions.
Yes, sir.
I have one. With all the events that you're planning for those 10 months, on average, have you all figured out, on average, how many people will attend those events?
It'll vary. Our target for concerts is going to be around 2,000 to 2,500 people. We'd love to go bigger, and if you're not familiar the way concerts work, you have to pay for the artist up front and take all the risk on selling the tickets. So I think to start with, we'll keep at that level. Some events, there may not be but 100 people there. And our goal, of course, because I live on that side of town, is we'll make sure that the events and the times that we have them are convenient times to kind of work with your traffic plan and make sure we're not trying to pile everybody in there at 5:30 in the afternoon when we're all going across that bridge. So.
What's the turf going to be? Is it AstroTurf, or is it going to be grass? And
It will not be grass.
Okay.
And I think there's different levels of AstroTurf, and someone who's smarter than me can answer that question, but it won't be grass.
Let's say, that being said, so when you do a festival or whatever, the AstroTurf that you use, is there any wear and tear, like with a concert or when you have drinks, food, et cetera? on those types of grass, or what, is any issues related to that?
There could be, and I
Maintenance.
think because we haven't finished the idea of a design process, we're not really married into an idea of where exactly those things could go. But I believe in the way they build these things now. They build them so you can actually drive trucks onto them, and there's surface that you can put down on top of the turf when you run an event like that to keep the turf protected.
Thank you.
I had a question, going back to Mr. Crimes with the mayor's original question, I don't think it quite got answered, was the ownership in the brewery. What was the,
The brewery is Lion Creek Brewery out of Peachtree City. That is, they've committed to, if we move forward, to locate their second operation there. They will lease from us, and in turn, we will turn around and pay a portion of that back to the city. So you're not directly in line with them. You have one agreement with one group, and it simplifies the operation.
I think Mr. Craig may help answer some of those questions when he gives, we'll pull it all together.
Right, and I don't want, if anybody's got another question, I'm not sure about, I've not talked to you about the time frame on them. We've got an hour before our council meeting starts, so you need to keep us on task here.
We'll be on task. We'll be on task.
So, okay. So are we there where we're moving on? Anyone else from council have?
Can you hit on parking? A lot of people have talked about parking. Right. That's different.
The site itself, it has a number of parking spots for itself. It varies on when the final design is done, but it's like 450 spots to 500, some number in that range. This is on the link, so we expect some traffic to be foot traffic. The project that Newnan has out now will allow people to be able to walk from the Ashley Park side to this. It would be a long walk, but it allows a little bit of foot traffic that way. There's multiple other areas that can, on larger events, we could coordinate with. And part of the pre-planning for the larger events that Ms. Shumper alluded to, it takes months and months to line it up so that when it's there and it looks seamless, there's a lot of behind-the-scene piece that makes it look that way. So traffic, if we knew that it was going to be a super large event, we could potentially park some at the convention center or the Newnan Center, and bring them back and forth that way if need be, because the proximity is fairly close.
One thing I told people, I said, you've got elementary school, you've got other places that wouldn't necessarily be open during these events. And some of the events, especially around the brewer, Uber is going to be doing a landslide business on that thing, because not everybody wants to drive into that. They would like to just get somebody to drive in. So I think you're going to find a very parking, like if you go to the Braves Stadium, you see the same thing. You park in a parking lot here and you walk in, or you do run golf carts and the shuttle and everything else. But there are multiple ways, because I just don't think we need that much parking for that event just sitting there all the time.
Yes, sir. And that was consistent with what all the designers had said as well.
All right. Okay. Let's move on.
Mr. Craig.
All right. Great.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and walk us through a document here that all of you have seen before. If there is a time in which you have a question, please stop me, and I'd be happy to discuss it in greater detail. The description of the project as proposed and we're currently considering involves the acquisition of real property along Newnan Crossing Boulevard near the intersection and Diplomat Parkway that was shared earlier by our colleagues with CPS. It also involves the construction of a multi-use facility designed to host myriad events similar to what Mr. Crimes had just described to you, everything from special events to CPL League Baseball and other types of activities, including concerts, festivals, and other potentially, Councilman DeBoe's, local, regional, and statewide athletic events. In addition, the project is contemplating the acquisition and construction of a mixed-use facility immediately adjacent to, Mr. Crimes had called it the private side. That additional piece of property as part of this project allows for the full financial mechanics of this deal to work as it's been proposed in the document I prepared and shared with you. The completed project, as proposed, if we continue along this path, will result in the development of, in my opinion, a destination sports, entertainment, and mixed-use facility that supports our community goals. Oftentimes, we adopt planning documents and other official documents, and I believe that this project supports those documents and those goals we have as a community to provide opportunities for job creation, private investment, and an enhanced quality of life. Number two, how does this project financed? We have oftentimes used the term bond financing. Our colleague from Baker Tilly, Tony King, is here, and he's been a vital part of the team in helping us understand what it looks like to borrow money and what it looks like to pay that money back. What I have included in your packet are two different financing scenarios for, we'll call it the multi-use athletic side, and then we'll consider the other. I have another scenario in here that discusses the financing for the private side, we can call it that, or the mixed-use facility. Under scenario 1A, the scenario contemplates the city of Newnan making a large lump sum investment on the front end of $4 million, borrowing an additional $19.8 million for the acquisition, construction, design, FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, contingencies, and then a number of associated financing costs. There's a cost to borrowing this, no different than how we manage our own resources at our homes. Creates a total source of funds of $23,840,000, and you see the uses of those funds, the balance in those two. That also understands and assumes a $21 million and some change construction project. In the second series or scenario I've laid out here for you contemplates the borrowing of the full amount and no lump sum payment on the front end, which means we're borrowing more money. And so in the event of borrowing more money, the costs of borrowing that money increase. Outside of that, the acquisition, construction, design, those other activities or uses of funds do not change. The construction project, the acquisition costs do not change in that scenario. On the following scenario, the last scenario shows Series 2 bond proceeds that would be utilized to assist with the adjacent property of a total of $53 million. $40 million and $515,000 will be borrowed. $12.5 million will be developer equity. That's a 25%. We'll use the term down payment on that. That allows for a $50 million acquisition and construction of those properties, those buildings that Mr. Crimes pointed to during his presentation, and associated financing costs. So, who's the primary borrower? Who borrows these funds? You guys and gal have heard me talk over time. The Newnan Development Authority is the agent in which would use that. It is important to note the Newnan Development Authority, the Development Authority of the City of Newnan, will be the borrowing agent. They will hold this debt. They will borrow the money. They will build the project. They will construct the project. They will be the landlord who will lease the space back to Newnan Grand Slam, who will operate all of those different special events and pay us, for conversation's sake, a rent payment. This is not all too different from what we did during the redevelopment of the Newnan Hospital project. For a number of you were here at that time. In that case, the Newnan Downtown Development Authority was the conduit, the financing agent. The reason why it's the Development Authority, not the Downtown Development Authority, is the Downtown Development Authority is jurisdictionally confined to lines on a map that encompass our downtown. This project is not in that downtown location. Ergo, we use the citywide development authority. So the next question, how will bond proceeds be repaid? In those scenario 1 and 2, I think it's anticipated that a program similar to what we will refer to from time to time as a pilot or payment in lieu of taxes. This is not explicitly that type of project, but for conversation's sake, it helps best understand and best explain. What we are anticipating doing is, in the effort to finance and allow for the adjacent development to take place, if the Newnan Development Authority owns that property, issues that debt, and constructs that project, because it's owned by a public entity, that public entity is not responsible for property tax or ad valorem tax. In this case, what we would like to do, and we've asked the developers, is to pay that, what they would have paid in property tax to us as a rent. We can use those funds to offset the gap we have in borrowing funds. So the two projects work together. One helps pay for the other. Now, Mr. Crimes and his crew are gonna pay us some rent. They're gonna get us so far up the ladder. Rent from the neighboring property that we can borrow money for and help them with that project will come to us to continue getting us up that ladder. Then the last little bit is for us to decide as a community, how much of that public investment is worth. So what I've shown you here is on those different scenarios, and again, these 1A, 1B, and 2 correspond back to what was shown earlier on the previous page. Show you what a potential annual payment we believe from Newnan Grand Slam would be, $350,000 a year. What we believe from the mixed-use neighboring developer could come in the tune of, and keep in mind, these are planning figures. A lot of these numbers, these things move as we pull these levers. But what I'm showing you is the opportunity to manage the total debt service under Series 1A, Series 1B. It's also important to note that the program described herein assumes that the developer will pay the entire debt service of their deal themselves. There's no public investment into the private development side. The development authority is simply the conduit of financing, assist them to borrow funds. They will assume the entire debt service payment themselves, just like they would if they were working with another financial institution. The difference here, we need that in rent from them to come back to help fill the gap or get us up that ladder to continue the illustration I used earlier. So the series 1A and 1B, the main difference is the amount of public investment. And they both tie back to how much of a lump sum or down payment do we feel is appropriate if we decide to continue with this project. So I've shown those scenarios. Again, members of the council, mayor, these levers, we can pull them and we can push them. We can make these payments larger, smaller, as we continue to move this project down the path. And again, I had spoken to the development authority, the city of Newnan will be the developer on the project, and we talked about the location of that. At this time, I know I just gave you a lot of information. I spoke for a while. I want to be available to answer questions if you have questions. You don't do this every day. I understand that. So please ask questions of Mr. Phillips and myself, and we'll do the best we can to answer you.
I've got a quick question. This goes probably to your bond. And I know you haven't, I didn't know if you're planning on getting up to speak or not. But earlier, someone had mentioned about prepaying. Is there prepaying bonds? How would that work?
With the permission of the mayor, are you speaking about being able to pay the bonds off early?
State your name for the record, please, so we'll have it in the minute.
Yes, sir. My name is Tony King, and I am with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors, and I am serving as financial advisor to the city of Newnan.
About paying off the bonds early.
Yes, sir. Typically, issues of municipal bonds have a period of time after they are issued where they cannot be prepaid at the by the issuer or the borrower. That period of time can vary. In the old days, it was 10 years. But a lot of things have happened since the old days that have tended to move that lockout period, if you will, to a shorter period of time. So typically now what we're seeing is a period of time of 7 to 8 years where bondholders cannot have their bonds paid off. After that period of time, the bonds can be prepaid by the issuer typically at a price of par or 100%, so there would not be typically a penalty for prepayment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Any other questions?
Mayor and Council, if I may just direct your attention, you heard a reference to a contribution from Newnan Grand Slam. I think Mr. Craver used the number of $350,000. That was based upon, and it's in the package, a framework agreement that we have been working on. Obviously, that's something that's yet to be decided. Obviously, if council were to move forward, that would be one of the items that we put into a more refined memorandum of understanding that refines the terms, the lease arrangements, et cetera. Obviously, from a planning perspective, it was a smart thing for us to do, to use what we would consider the floor of their contributions. We would hope that based upon the market analysis that we've received from Hunden Strategic Partners, which was very favorable for the market position for these type of events, and very unique concept. So the opportunity is definitely there from the market. So we would hope that the Newnan Grand Slam and their structure would be successful, so that the $350,000 is that just a floor of what we would actually receive from lease payments. Would actually be greater than that because it would be structured as percentages. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that we did just use the 350 as the floor for planning purposes. Just was the conservative way to present that particular financing model to council. But again, still a lot of work to do, particularly refining a more definitive MOU that's related to not only the project framework agreement, the land options, bond rating. City of Newnan, if we choose to go the bond route, we haven't been rated, so that will be a process. Selection of the design team. So there's a lot of things that would absolutely have to be laid out in that more refined MOU if you're interested in moving to that particular step.
How long do you anticipate it takes to craft that MOU?
The lead for crafting that MOU would be Mr. Sears and Mr. Taylor, bond counsel. So I'm going to defer to those two in crafting that MOU.
Mr. Sears, how long do you think it would take to put that MOU together?
I
2 to 3
defer to
weeks.
Mr. Craver. Because he's been in contact.
I have nobody to my left, so I'll
You have
answer
no
that
one on your
question.
left.
I believe we can get that done. Our next meeting is February 11th, is that
I probably
right?
wanna say
Yeah.
30 days
It's
to
probably
say.
gonna, second meeting in February.
Okay.
I believe we can get to all the items Mr. Phillips described, which would include, defining a scope within the MOU that may include, naming the project partners and roles more specifically. The Development Authority, as Councilman DeBose was asking about earlier, what is their specific responsibility? What is the city's specific responsibility? As well as, allowing or staff the authority to obtain services of a qualified architectural firm, engaging that Development Authority and an intergovernmental agreement between this body and the Development Authority, similar to what we did with the Downtown Development Authority, making a final determination on the land option, engaging those financial partners to obtain, a bond rating, and then making sure that all of the legal standards are in place and are appropriate.
So who determines, obviously, the money generated from all of the spaces?
Mhm.
There's a rent roll.
Yes, sir.
So who determines the rent roll?
What we've done is we've used market pricing to develop what we believe is a market rate for the finish that we've been asked to provide. So as you saw in the project agreement, we proposed at $15 per square foot per year on that, and that's to take the space to
Warm
4
shell
walls,
space.
a ceiling, warm shell space. The tenants will make their own TI or tenant improvement from that point forward. And so we believe in understanding the market, that's market rate, that we can get that. We've also developed in understanding the financial records shared with us from Newnan Grand Slam, what we believe that they can pay in a rent back to us, but still operate We'd hate to command such a rent that they can no longer operate. So we believe that we're meeting them there. I think Mr. Phillips hit the nail on the head when he had said earlier, Mr. Crimes mentioned it himself, figuring out a way that we can all share, all of us, the community, investing in this in the upside. So if there's a strong upside, that I think there are ways in which we can develop a legal framework where we can all share in the upside. But the rent rolls, as shown here, is establishing a floor. And I think that's how we can most judiciously consider if we should move forward.
Okay. Any other questions from council?
I have one, Mayor.
Sure.
With all this that we've talked about, and Mr. Crimes alluding to, hopefully 21, June of 21, and your experience, and this is probably to both y'all. Is that doable to get all this done?
So I've got no one on my left again to move it to. I'll be real with you, Councilman Alexander. That's a hard date to hit.
Okay.
I'm just real with you, but that doesn't mean that the facility doesn't open in 2021 and you have concerts and you have festivals. 'Cause
Sure, I understand.
as we contemplate investing, our community investing in this, understanding that the baseball diamond looks pretty, but there are 10 months of the year that this facility will be operating. And so in order for us, I think, to make a wise choice, that we need to consider that. And so I'd hate to rush on you a decision. Will we try our best to get everything done? If this corporate body so decides to move forward, yes, sir, we will do that. We'll move, but we want to give the community the best project that we can.
I'd like, to his point, I'd like to see numbers that are adjusted by date opening. In other words, if we miss the baseball season and it opens
Right.
Labor Day,
Yeah, if I may take
What is
you,
that-
sir.
what does
Yes,
that do?
that's a great point. If I may take you to the agreement framework you see, what we have asked for in this framework under the first option of Grand Slam's contribution is almost an earnest payment. We've asked them to set aside and put down monies that they would make this payment to us. So those monies are there year one when they open. Now, Newnan Grand Slam may push back on us and say, if I'm not operating a CPL league and I can't do that, and that's only a question that they can answer at this point. But we anticipate having monies for year one according to this project agreement, because this is a substantial investment on behalf of our community. And so I can get you a number where it carves the baseball out, and that number is 100,000. So if you were to carve out, if you're missing a season
Baseball.
of baseball, carve $100,000 out of that 350 anticipated floor per year payment. So that floor may sit at 250 in year one.
but it would be worth for $100,000 to open it on August 1 if it was ready,
Yes, sir.
instead of waiting till June 2022.
Yes, sir.
There would be
Yep.
no reason to do that.
I've got a question if you're finished. Tying this back into our other city project, the link. Previous to the link, and we've already started our DOT approvals to get the bridge built, and it was
Yeah,
over
we
on
got
the
the permit
other side
today.
of the apartment complex. So now, with the permitting, and now discussion of moving the link, how's that affect? I know at one of the meetings, 'cause I was approached by a couple people, said, they're now talking about moving the link, or somebody had said about moving the link
Yeah.
up
What
by the stadium. So
We're
can we just
considering
address
that,
that?
yes, yeah, great point. And I'm glad you brought it up so that members of the public, those either sitting at home watching or those in the audience can see. Councilman Carrico, as you know, the link is currently located in this area. I think I saw you on it, was it Saturday? So we're up here and it comes to Newnan Crossing Boulevard and then travels south down here to the intersection with Summerlin. It's currently programmed and planned to continue on a northward along a side path here. But what we understand and what we would like to do is as it comes down to Summerlin, comes in front of the promenade, runs along 85 to a bridge right across here, that we would continue that here. Allow for a new section to be planned. And we've actually asked the team at PATH and Kaizen to actually start laying that out already. And in anticipation of this, we're under contract with them, this body, greenlit that contract to do that master planning work for us. So they're doing that
It'd be an
now.
addition instead of a relocation.
It's-
So we
it'd be
would
a spur off.
continue.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yep.
Yes, sir. We would continue with the current plan and maybe add a spur, to use the mayor's term.
Staying along the conversation of transportation, and I want to recognize the input that we received 2 weeks ago at our public input meetings. And most of the conversations were around traffic, and we understand that. And we've had internal conversations with ourselves, Mr. Wilbur. And I think what we would do, and it's not directly tied just to whether this project is approved or not, but I think there's 3 transportation projects that would council, we'd be right to explore. One of those being the intersection of Intercrossing Boulevard and State Route 34, which would require some GDOT coordination, because 34 is obviously a GDOT road. The second project would be consideration of signalization at Diplomat Parkway and Stonebridge Drive. And the third project is something that we had started. Obviously, Peace Plus wasn't successful, but we still have a transportation engineering firm that's working on a concept plan for Lower Fayetteville Road. And what I would like to do, or what I'd like to consider, is advising that firm to focus on what I would call early operational improvements. Not so much focus on the 15-year plan of the 4-lane widening, because we know that the dollars aren't sitting there for that. But we can ask them to focus on turning lane improvements, signal phasing, things that we can do operationally with existing funds that we do have. So I think that those 3 transportation improvements would really help some of the traffic flow, even not associated with this project, just every single day. But I just wanted to bring that out there because we did hear that in the public input meetings. I think it's fair to say that we would address those concerns.
Right.
Well, a couple other comments, just again, so folks can know kind of where we're at. There was talk about paid or unpaid parking at the, I'm just addressing some issues that I'm just coming off the top of my head here. There was the traffic, of course, right? And if there was gonna be enough parking. Now you touched on that briefly. So going to the paid or unpaid parking, is there any thoughts on that?
We have had conversations about paid or unpaid, and frankly, today, as we sit here, Councilman Carrico, there's not a definitive answer. There's probably an opportunity to have a paid-to-park program for a certain type of an event, but it's highly unlikely that we would see a pay-to-park environment or program for the CPO league team or festivals. But concerts of a certain type, I think there's an expectation when they're bringing that amount of people and that a price point that there would be a pay-to-park program.
Most of the events would likely.
Yeah.
A pay-to-park program would just force people on the city streets, and that's not what we want to have happen.
Appreciate it, thank you.
So, other questions, comments?
There are a number of documents that were included in there. I want to make sure that you can ask me whatever you need. I know there's.
Well, I guess while Mr. Franco was brought up parking, I think that there might be a possibility that we could take the city property that's down at Diplomat Parkway and the boulevard there, and at some point in the future explore a gravel and grass type of parking lot where folks could walk or take some sort of easy transportation to the stadium. I think we could look at that in the future as need for shows.
Sure.
But there is
Certainly is a possibility.
We've discussed that possibility. It's not included in these price estimates, but we have discussed the potential utilization, how the 10 acres is utilized. Obviously, we wouldn't need 10 acres of parking, but you may have a 1 or 2 acre, I don't call it grass because it would have an underlaying of a rock where it would actually support grass, but we just been throwing out ideas.
Well, my
Certainly,
reason for bringing that up is so that folks don't get all hung up on parking.
there are options that we own in that area for parking, correct?
Okay, any other questions, comments from council? Okay, so we do have a meeting that starts in, about 35 minutes here. So, and typically we like as a council, and I like to entertain a fairly tight motion. I don't want to limit if someone's going to make a motion for us to move forward. I don't want anyone I don't think we should necessarily limit it in scope. I think it ought to be a motion that allows for staff to go out and do any and everything that they see fit to bring us back the information we need to do this, from the legal side, from bond counsel, from parking to the link, to nailing down the rent rolls, nailing down square footage. I mean, rent roll is fine, but if you don't know the square footage to apply it to, we got, that doesn't help a whole lot. So just whatever they need to do to bring this back to us. So it's very comprehensive, just like what you've got here, except in much more detail.
That's exactly the motion I'd like to make.
Second.
Would you like me to repeat it?
I think Ms. Della has it.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion about what we're doing here? Once again, to the public, to the press, to those who are out there watching, this is not a final vote for a final move forward for a decision on this project. This is a process. This is actually, I don't know which step this is in the process, because there was so much discussion that went on during the stages when it was just an infant and talking about it. But this is the first hearing we've had, or meeting we've had as a formal meeting as a council. The other meetings, the public meetings we had, were not formal council meetings. So there'll be many more of these as we step through. The next one, at our meeting in February, and I suggest that we go on right now and not make it part of that meeting, but have another 5 o'clock work session meeting, so that we can, without objection from someone on the council, so we can have this type of discussion again without worrying about the other items on the agenda that need action. So I have a motion and a second, and then we'll go back to setting the date and the time after I call the question. If there are no more questions or comments about the motion and the second. Okay, all those in favor? Okay. Without objection from council, then I'm going to call a 5 o'clock meeting, or do you want a 4:30? Okay, 5 o'clock meeting on, someone give me the date.
February
I'm getting there.
25th.
25th, thank you, 2020, for the exclusive purpose of discussing the event project, special events project, the Newnan Entertainment and Sports District project would be what we've got on this agenda, so let's be consistent. So we'll do that at 5 o'clock in this location. Okay, anything else for this meeting? Is there a motion to
Move to
adjourn?
adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We appreciate it very much. Check our websites for updates